Hi everyone. So the objectives. Why do we need cybersecurity? And what is a CIA Triad? And we'll be learning more about the threats, vulnerabilities, and the risk. Also, we'll be understanding the risk governance and risk management. We also learn about the architecture and how to governance, auditing, and compliance. Also, moreover, understanding the complete system security and its design. So in this slide, there are two characters I can see discussing on what is cybersecurity and the importance of it. So before I start the securing of the present, let me take you to a couple of years later, maybe decades later, when it was started and the evolution just before the beginning of internet era. Today, hackers, what we see on the movies, will have multiple monitors and just like having a green screen, the numbers floating on the monitors from left to right and ups and downs. Okay, it was not the season or the year it was began. The hacking, the term, which was initially even more popular during the time we had just the telephone, the public telephone network. Those time, the term they call the phone freaks, they use a regular standalone telephone network to frequent to middle into. They just use the phone's dial tone, the calling pattern to hack into the environment. Just with the telephone, they played around and they made, that was a huge mischief even with that. Nowadays, we see most of the computers are connected throughout the globe, not only computers. So later, the evolution of internet, anything and everything is getting connected. And recent day, we see a high trend in getting most of the devices even connected. We can have the term Internet of Things. We just have our smartphone connected, smart rings connected, even the refrigerator, television, washing machine, what else? Anything and everything is connected. So it is no more personal to anyone. Anybody can watch anyone. That's how it is. So the need of the cybersecurity, and as I said to you before, we live in an era of internet, and most of our activities are happening over internet. So we simply call Alexa, switch on the light. Yeah, just play me a music. Everything is just connected. So getting our things connected to public network, that's good thing. We can access our information wherever and whenever it's needed, but that should be accessed only by us. And that's for us self-use. And also, it is important that the network we are using must be secure so that the people cannot hack our bank details and personal data. Obviously, okay. In order to make the network secure, companies adopt cybersecurity. The cybersecurity is more important as it protects the data from being hacked and misused. It also protects our system from external attacks and so on. All right. So it's not only the safety of it outside the organization; it's also from happening inside. So we can call it as an insider threat. Any abnormal or misbehavior and non-disciplined employee which causing a business harm, that's called as insider threat. And the cybersecurity is a combination of process, practice, and technology designed to protect the network, computers, programs, data, and information from attack, damage, or any unauthorized access. So anything and everything which starts with the CIA triad. So what is called CIA? Confidentiality, integrity, and the availability. So let me tell you what is confidentiality. It's a non-disclosure of information and the protection of something and maintaining as highly confidential. Just keeping a document on your safe and locking it up. Nobody have access to it. Or getting a secret from your one of your close friend and not disclosing to anyone. So anything and everything which has to be confidential has to be maintained confidentially. Okay. And integrity. So what do we call as an integrity? Any data or any message or any transaction should be retained same. So it should not be a tampered data. So no manipulation happening. For a simple example, it is simply take a bank account and you are the authorized person when you deposit 10,000 rupees or 100,000 rupees in your account. Only the person you know that how much you deposited and how much you have on your account. That's confidentiality. The integrity, what it means, the amount whatever you deposited has to be the same. It should not be 1 rupee less or 1 rupee higher. It should be exactly what it is. So that's called untampered or integrity of a data, the information or anything and everything. Availability. So availability is also plays a major role. Whatever you made or whatever you needs to be accessed anytime in its need, whenever you and wherever you need. As like your bank account, you can go to any of your ATM, you can use your mobile banking, you can transfer your fund from your smartphone, anything. So whenever and wherever you need to access your information or your data, it has to be available. So these are the top three triads, which is so important: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And most of the security concept will be following the same path. We concentrate on each and every step and every rule and every policy we apply, the confidentiality of the data, integrity of the data, and the availability of the data. We'll be taking it in consideration. And these are the very important thing we plan on any security policy or procedure. Confidentiality, user ID and the password, access control list, and the policy-based security represents confidentiality. Now the integrity. The data is edited by only authorized person and remains in its original state when at rest. Data encryption and hashing algorithms are key process in providing integrity. Obviously. So the hashing algorithms and encryption plays a major role in keeping the data secure. There are three different states of data. One is data at rest and data at transit and data in use. Data in use when the data is actively in the memory or actively it's used, and data is transit. It's transferring the data from one device to other device or transmitting from one computer to other computer. That's called data in transit. And data at rest. This is when we have a backup or when we archive the information to some other drives or store it. I mean, the data is still at rest. Nobody is accessing, but even it resides on some of your hard drives or any storage. Availability. The data and information system are available when required to opt app entities. Backups, load balancing, DDoS protection, software patching upgrade, and network optimization ensures the availability. So the availability of the data, the resource should be up all the time, whenever and wherever we need. Okay, again, this slide again shows the same about confidentiality. It's all about making sure that data is accessible only to its intended or authorized individuals. So also it gives different types of attacks. What can happen just to break your confidentiality? Decrypting or deciphering the encrypted data. When you store a data, it should be confidential and it should not be retrieved to anybody else. It's just like a password safe. So the cracking or decrypting the encrypted file, that's one more possibility. Or man in the middle attack on a plain text data. Man in the middle attack, it's a type of attack usually carried out during a video chat or WebEx chat or even a bank transaction. Any person who peeps into your, I mean, not only peeps into the network, he will be a middleman. He'll be eavesdropping, listens to any traffic or any data transfer happening over your network to a secure remote server. So he'll be a person in the middle and he'll be tapping. You would be more watching the movies. Some person will tap onto the calls and listen to everything. Similar to this, you connect your office computer from your home, or you use a bank transaction from your laptop to make some financial transaction. What happens when someone in the middle between you and your bank? So the person in the middle can obviously manipulate the data and he can alter the data which is sent by you to your bank. So this is called a man in the middle attack. Data leakage scenario, leakage of data. This is a very major thing happening. The data which is stored on the computer, it's like unauthorizedly copied to some other drive. For example, when you let some of your friend access your computer, what happens? By knowingly or unknowingly, he might copy some sensitive information to you. Or while copying some movies or songs or audio files, accidentally copy some of your personal belongings. So that's a data leak. So similarly, it happens not only to your personal computer and also to your corporate data. Database administrator who backs up data to a tape drive, a stored drive. So even the backing up is a routine process and it's a following process. But what happens when sensitive data is backed up? For a particular example, The credit card information or banking information of a particular session needs to be destroyed immediately after the completion of transaction on any banking scenarios. So what happens when the data is not destroyed or deleted after the transaction and it keeps on backed up on a tape drive? That should not happen. And the other method also installing a spyware, malware on a local computer, which captures the data and transfers to a remote server. So these are the ways the confidentiality can be broken. The integrity is all about making sure that the data is kept proper intact without it being meddled within the unauthorized way. So the type 1, web server penetration of malware insertion and data scrambling. Anyone can, I mean, not all the servers I can assure you on. Any device or any highly secured network can be penetrated. To be frank, this is just how smart the attackers are. The softwares which is not so intelligent and they are not so environment aware. And to be in conjunction, we use multiple softwares for multiple use. Okay, and from multiple vendors. Even the softwares from a single vendor does not trust the other. So we have ups and downs on this as well. And maliciously accessing financial server in order to forge financial records and tunneling a machine into a zombie, a computer, or controlling it remotely. Making a machine zombies mean that you still own your computer and you do a daily activity, but in the background, it will carry out some of the work of an attacker or hacker, whatever they call, and you will not even notice that your computer is doing some malicious activity on behalf of someone else sitting around different part of the globe. And unauthorized database access and manipulation of records. These are the ways the integrity of the data can be destroyed. Availability. Availability is all about making sure the data and the computers are available as needed by authorized parties. One, denial of service. Okay, so now we move on to the threats, vulnerabilities, and risk. Let us first understand what is a threat and different type of threats and the ways we assess the threat and risk. A threat is anything, it not only software or a system crash, even it can be treated as a natural threat like earthquake, floods or tornadoes, and unintentional threat. So it's just like not voluntarily or deliberately doing something, inadvertent event by an employee causing deletion or publication of private data. Third category is an intentional threat, which is like a malware, a spyware, or anything which is not intentionally done at your end. Three methods of threat analysis assessment technologies. One is vulnerability assessment and pen testing. Vulnerability assessment and pen testing, these are two different actions or activities carried out in the environment. Vulnerability assessment. Vulnerability is not only based on the hardware, it's also on the software. The vulnerability assessment is identifying a bug or a weakness on the hardware level or on the software level. We have multiple companies which works for it. The Google's Project Zero, which has a dedicated team who test on all the softwares, any softwares, not only from Windows, Mac, even the mobile application. They try to hack, they try to identify the weakness, and they'll be disclosing to the developers first. They'll have initial SLA time. When vulnerability is identified, they will be disclosing it to the developer or the manufacturer, and they'll be giving a particular time frame, 60 days, 90 days, depending on the sensitivity of the vulnerability. And once the vulnerability is not fixed on the agreed SLA, it will be published publicly. So the vulnerability made available to any public, so anyone can make use of the vulnerability and exploit it. And in our case, the publicly available vulnerabilities will be tracked. We can use a scanners like Qualys Guard, Nessus Scanner. Those kind of softwares will have the database of available vulnerabilities. So we'll be using those scanners to scan the entire network inside the company. And these scanners will validate whether any of the mentioned vulnerabilities available or obtained on the local infrastructure, and that will generate a report. So this is just mapping up already available vulnerability, whether it's applicable to the environment or not. This is called vulnerability assessment. And the penetration testing. Penetration testing is separate, highly skilled, talented hackers. There are three different types of hackers. One is white hat, They are the good guys, obviously. We help people identify the weakness. We try to break in the system. We try to crack the network. Whatever we do, just to help the organization identify there is a weakness in it, just to fix it. The same contrast, the black hat. The guys does the same action. They'll be cracking the perimeter. They're cracking into the environment. They do whatever activity done by the white hat, but for the personal gain. They will not help you, but they use it for the personal gain. The guy in the middle, he's called a gray hat. He's neither a good guy or a bad guy. He just stands on the middle. So the pen testing team, we also call them red team. There are three different teams for security. One is the red team. We attack the environment, not only the network wise, the software wise. We try to exploit, we try to penetrate. And the red team, the people, we work for the organization. We are employed for an enterprise. It will be a part of the security team. Duty is to attack or find the exploit bug in the local environment. And the blue team, which is a team who are the professional of defensive security, they do whatever action. They install softwares, they install antivirus, they use the data leak prevention, they use the vulnerability management system to patch. So they are the defenders. They defend the environment not only from the red team, the who are employed within the organization, also from the outside. There also we have a person in it's called a purple team who knows the knowledge of red team and also have possessed the knowledge of blue team. So these team will be in middle of the attacking and the defending team with possessing both the skills and knowledge of both vectors. The second type, the threat intelligence. The threat intelligence is not only from your single network, single standpoint. The threat intelligence is available from any security vendor or even from the product vendor. Whenever a threat is identified by any of the software vendor or a manufacturer or an individual organization, it will be published and it will be notified to all others. So it's called a global intelligence. Anyone who works for cybersecurity, they'll share the best practices or quick tip or a alert or a flyer, anything for a particular threat or particular infection or anything. The second method is tactics, techniques, and procedures. The tactics, techniques, and procedure is formed by the lessons learned from the past. Whenever a threat or incident happened, and what are the ways we used it, and how do we prevent it, and what are the tools and techniques we used from the periodic study on the previous incident, best possible methods and best possible remediations. We develop the tactics, techniques, and procedure. So we follow it on the upcoming incidents or upcoming threat, any event. The indicator of compromise. This is a very important word. IOCs. IOCs. This just lets you know whether your computer is compromised or anything goes wrong, when anything goes abnormal, or it's an anomaly based or heuristics based. If something is not on the normal baseline, when it goes abnormal, you will obviously get indicator of compromise. So we need to further investigate it and to get it on the go. So the third one would be the root cause analysis, and root cause analysis will be doing on the last. When everything happened, we dig deep. It's just like a postmortem. So once the incident is happened, we go back and we dig from the past and we again go through the history to identify what went wrong and how it was happened. As we have seen the threat in a way to harm an organization, but how the harm is done will be understood in vulnerability. The term vulnerability refers to a weakness of an asset that can be exploited by one or more attackers. In other words, it's an issue or a bug that allows attacks to be successful. Open vulnerability refers to the knowledge or bug or a defect that is identified and freely available to anyone. It's just like exposing the weakness of a particular software or hardware to public. And this slide takes you to understanding the vulnerability. So now we take on the assessing the vulnerability and what are the ways, what are the questions we need to ask ourselves. So whether is the key data which is backed up and stored on an offsite. So any backup, any secure data to be secured should be in a safe zone, which is offline and it's not connected to the local environment administrators. So that's why, the malwares or virus infection that can leach and that can crawl into the network and not only to any connected device. So always having an offline backup is much more important. So the other question will be, is the data stored on the cloud? How good it is against the vulnerability? And what are the ways to recover the data? Okay, and also what kind of antivirus or anti-malware defense you have, and what kind of network level security you have on the environment. So the vulnerability scoring system, that's common. It was described by NIST, and the common vulnerability scoring system will have four different categories. One is low, medium, high, and critical. Anything from 0.1 to 3.9, that's low. The 3 to 5.9, it's medium, and 6 to 8, that's high, and anything beyond 8, that goes as critical. So we have the link here, we can calculate the vulnerability score. So the CVSS scoring parameters, the base score, the attack vector, the factors which are considered are attack vectors, attack complexity, the privileges required, and the user interaction, the scope, the confidentiality, integrity, and as well as the availability. So these are the points which consider on the base scoring system. And also the temporal score, which also get the exploit code maturity. I mean, how long the exploit code is in the field, and how good the code evolved, and the remediation level, and the report confidence. The confidence of the report submitted for the vulnerability identifier, how confident he on the proof of concept he submitted on it, and the remediation level, and how fast the identified vulnerability can be remediated, and what are the steps to be involved. And also based on the environmental score, so what are the platform it affect, and what are the devices and how major it goes. So again, we see the confidentiality requirement, integrity requirement, availability, modifying attack vectors, and so other various factors which are considered for the scoring system. So this is the two formulas which we need to be always have in mind. Risk equal to threat into vulnerabilities. For example, if you have a threat, unintended employee, untrusted insider as a threat into the number of available vulnerabilities. So obviously the level of risk goes high, and also risk equal to the impact and also the frequency. So these are the formulas for it. So now we go for what is a risk. Risk refers to the potential or loss of damage when a threat exploits a vulnerability. For example, financial loss as a result of business disruption, loss of privacy, reputational damage, legal implication, even loss of a loved one or personal life. So anything and everything considered as a risk. There are points or there are key consideration for risk management strategy, that is for assessing the risk and decide or determine the need for the business. I mean, business needs. So also to include a total stakeholders perspective when thinking on cybersecurity, not only for a single person to decide on the authority, we need to listen to other experts or other stakeholders to considering it. Because every day the different type of technology involved in getting a business up and running. So we need to listen and we need to plan on all the areas and all the direction and have a dedicated risk practitioner. So every organization now slowly getting up information security officer and chief compliance officer. So nowadays I'm listening and I can also see number of postings or number of openings happening recently. Now slowly all the companies are understanding the how important the cybersecurity is and the need of a security expert in them, and also to implement appropriate policies and related controls. So the policies and controls are to be rewritten and remodified. There are multiple international standard of organization, ISO 27001 and 27002. Those have a list of policies and best practice. I mean, the controls available. You can use those controls and you can identify what are the controls will applicable for your environment, and you can use it. And also monitor and evaluate the policy and control effectiveness. It's not only simply applying the policy or controls, we need to understand and estimate and to test or evaluate how good the policies and the control we implemented works. So periodical revision of the policy and periodically revising the controls, and it has to be done to the continuously evolving threat landscape and the risk vectors. So now we come to the risk governance and risk management. So before moving more, let us discuss about the few keywords which are to be known by us, which gives a good understanding of what is a risk and what risk management are. Okay, so here in this slide we see five keywords. One is called risk. Risk reflects the combination of probability of an event occurs and the impact that event has on the enterprise, opportunities of benefit and threats to success. Risk appetite, the amount of risk that an entity is willing to accept in the pursuit of the vision. Everyone knows the fact that nobody is 100% foolproof or 100% protected. So any amount of risk particular entity is willing to accept, improving the current strategy or improvement in the current baseline. And the next one is the risk tolerance, the acceptable amount of variation of the that managers is willing to allow for a particular risk, the amount of risk we can take on the different category of the risk, on the severity, how serious or how impactful to the business. The risk culture, second keyword, determine how openly risk and losses are perceived, reported and discussed. And this is a good point. Whenever, wherever we come across a risk, all the organization will have a habit of recording the risk, threats, or incidents, whatever have happened, and also they need to periodically revise. They need to discuss on. I mean, same like the root cause analysis that will be done as soon as an incident happened. Similarly, that will be considered as a risk, and the risk will be discussed with within the security team and security experts to plan or create new custom rules or policies to prevent it from happening in future. Governance is a process which ensures that the stakeholders needs to be keep the business on track on a mission and vision. The role of governance is to keep the business active, up and running all the time, whatever happened. I mean, anytime, even the natural calamity or a business risk or anything happening, the business should run. That is the main objective of the governance. So the stack is the deck is stacked like risk governance, risk management, risk aversion. Risk governance, they take care of managing the risk. I mean, they're the person who decide what to do. It's a strategically function that helps ensure that the business keeps moving. And the management level, they manage on the aspects like how people to be organized, how the people segment, and what are the processes, and what kind of resources are involved, and what type of practices we can do. The governance, they actually decide the rules and the management will plan where to implement it. And the risk management, identification, assessment and prioritization of risk, followed by coordinated and economical application of resources to control risk within the acceptable level. So any organization will try to take the risk and they will get a acceptable level of risk to sustain the business. Risk aversion, the related of a person of to accept and bargain with the uncertain payoff. This does not mean taking a path where the result have associated uncertainty. This is subtle driven that affects decision making into a risk-based scenario. So we know what is a risk governance and risk management and the factors we have to consider before creating a rule or policy. Okay, the slide again takes us to the same risk assessment page. Now, the assessment of risk is the probability that a threat which exploits a vulnerability in the system and thereby creating a disruption in the regular activity. So in this slide, we'll be simplifying it. We need to identify the risk and how hazardous or what are the risk factors and how impactful it is, and analyze and evaluate. So not only analyzing it by the periodic review or statistic review, we need to understand and evaluate how riskful it for the particular business. So not all the risk will be applicable to all type of businesses who carry out. And the third one is this treatment. So what are the things, what are the controls we need to implement? What are the procedure and precautions we need to take to remediate? When to take the risk assessment? Risk assessment is to be taken on every project life cycle. So whenever you start up a business or start up a project, risk calculation and the risk assessment should be done. Also, it should be periodically changing how the landscape expands. So the initially the project started, the assessment would be different, and during the progress it would be different. So also and periodically it has to be reviewed. to meet up the constantly changing landscape. This slide risk analysis. So two types, the quantitative risk analysis and qualitative risk analysis. Okay, the quantitative risk analysis is the thing on the repetitive or recursive action of event or risk. Simply the focusing on mapping of probability of occurrence of a specific event to the expected cost associated with the event. So same like the risk, we also have a formula of general formula ALE equal to ARO multiplied by SLE. ALE the annualized loss expectancy, and ARO annualized rate of occurrence, and SLE the single loss expectancy. This is also the treatment. Any risk has to be treated and should be a person who is separately appointed, and he would be the chief information security officer, and who will be governs the security activity of the organization. So this four quadrants give you the understanding of risk acceptance and risk retention, or risk avoidance or risk elimination, risk sharing or transfer, risk modification or mitigation. So these are the four available options of risk treatment. So there are multiple frameworks which help us to identify and help to remediate or treat the risk. We can use the commonly followed NIST, ISO, or risk IT frameworks for it. So this slide gives you the readout topic of risk acceptance or retention. The slide to same goes to the risk avoidance or elimination. This is one of the other method of treating up the risk. We can talk about the security controls. What are the controls available for security? So let us talk about the controls. So what we call it as a control in security term. In the real world, same like switching on the light or switching off the light, just a switch. On the cyber world, we have multiple switches which trigger for any action. There is a policy or rule implement. So the information security control is including of all the processes, policies, procedures, predefined guidelines, or any best practices which are practiced, followed on any organization. So there are typically the three types of security controls. One is the administrative control, the physical controls, and technical controls. The types of control by action. There are four different types: the preventive controls, detective controls, the corrective controls, and deterrent controls. See about the preventive controls. The controls which are proactively prevent any risk. That is called a preventive control. Example, hardening of the system, and also you can call antivirus software as a preventive control. And the detective control is detecting any anomalies or improper activity happening on the environment. Your intrusion detection system, example. And the corrective control, if something goes wrong, that will be fixed immediately, called for example, the intrusion prevention system. The both intrusion detection system and the intrusion prevention system are available as on network level as well as host level. And the deterrent controls. So deterrent controls discourage the exploitation of a vulnerability or a system. For example, logon banner, system use notification, etc. So the control selection, we have various frameworks. So we are the person who have the responsibility to decide what controls to be placed on our business. So the control selection methods, we can also use ISO 27002 NIST framework, and we can pick up the controls which are predefined and use it on it. And the two different type of controls are key controls, which are more significant, more appropriate to the line of business we do, and also the compensating controls, which is like a supplement to the primary. Okay, the risk management is the identification, assessment, and prioritization of risk, followed by coordinated and economical application of resources to minimize, monitor, and control the probability or impact of adverse event or maximize the realization of opportunities. Number one essential of my risk management is to understand the risk to the organization and to accept the process of framework or to measure the risk or the risk impact to be more meaningful to the business, and communicating the identified risk to the right people. So whenever a risk is identified or documented, that has to be cascaded to the appropriate team who handles it. And once the risk is informed, we need to select an appropriate risk treatment plan The other points also deals with the same risk management and the ladder, how it moves further. Okay, risk management frameworks. NIST is more popular and more common. Most of the enterprises, most of the organization use the framework which is designed and released by NIST. The risk management framework SP 800-387. So NIST not only deals with the frameworks, it's a US government agency which provides instructions and assistance not only for consumer level, it also guides US government on handling the cybersecurity and various cyber procedures. The risk management steps are pretty simple and also it's self-explanatory. We need to categorize and we need to select on decide on how to implement on assessing, authorizing, and monitoring. So this is the ISO 27005 overview. So the cybersecurity architecture and the security policy. Security architecture is the designing your entry points, each and every entry point until your exit point. As like your physical premise, we have a security guard standing outside to give us an entry, and also the one who stands outside to check whether everyone is leaving out. So same like the physical world, we'll be designing the entry point. I mean, how the data enters and how someone enters into the digital world or digital environment, and how does it exits. So this is called cyber architecture and security policies. It's also giving the access, rights, or what has to be done on a particular instance or particular event. So customizing the policy. There are five lists available to identify the weakness in the information security. One is incoherent security administration process, redundant or insecting security tools, difficulty getting funds and approval for security initiatives. That was happened long back, but recently we are getting good funds on security initiatives. Audit finding and lengthy audit procedures. Tools not operational or not well accepted by the users. So nowadays, even the tools are user friendly, and we are getting the security training awareness and the security training programs is happening. I mean, more frequently on all the organization. So the tools, techniques, or anything is getting trained. What is a weak information security? The failure to identify security's value is the key. I mean, incorrect choices among completing solutions, ineffective project management, weakness related business strategy. Okay, we classify the enterprise architecture as two. One is the enterprise architecture and the other one as the enterprise information security architecture. The enterprise architecture is a process of translating business vision strategy to a enterprise level. They just need the business to function, designing or constructing how the business has to be working. Likewise, the enterprise information security architecture is much more concentrating on how secure the business has to be done. So these are the terms which we need to be familiarized. The IT architecture and the interdependencies. So the dependency between the particular hardware or a particular software or a particular business needs particular kind of infrastructure. So the dependencies and the support of reusable controls, regulatory compliance, legal, benchmarking and best practices, financials. Okay, again, this goes to the self-security governance and the controls. Information security governance is responsibility of board of directors or senior executives. It must be an integral and transparent part of enterprise governance and be aligned to the IT governance framework. So the framework is decided, and nowadays the information security becomes very much important for everyone. So the management or the directors need to be more responsible on choosing a framework or implementing the controls on it. So these are also the benefits what we get. So when we improve the security posture, or when we say that we are 100% compliant, couple of years back, the information security and information security, those were just a guidelines. Any organization needs to just follow and they have to comply to the. But now the act like GDPR, General Data Protection Act, those become an act that's become a law, and the security of digital information is getting more sensitive. So getting up a good security posture of a company will obviously get us a good reputation and decrease in the likelihood of privacy violations and so on. Okay, the security auditing. There are various security auditors or private firms or private consultants. Obviously, the security auditing will not be done by the employee who is employed on the same organization. Most companies will have an auditor visiting from outside, and he'll be evaluating the control structure, control procedures, and how we follow, and what are the best practices used for the enterprise security. So the control audit refers to the regulations on GDPR, data privacy law, the frameworks of NIST or ISO 27001, etc. Those are the frameworks, the privacy laws, which are followed by the general auditors, information security auditors, who comes to audit us. Okay, the compliance, it's compiling to some strict rules or strict procedures which are to be followed to keep us secure on the digital environment. Okay, for the compliance, we also have multiple frameworks like PCI DSS, that is payment card industry, and HIPAA, FISMA. These are all the compliance has to be maintained. The HIPAA is mainly used for the health and insurance companies, and PCI is on all the payment gateways or banking sectors, etc. And need for compliance is just to get improved security and increase in the control of our business, and to acquire a trust from the customers, and also to minimize the losses we come across. So these are the common compliance regulations: GDPR, the Data Protection Act, and FISMA, the Information Security Management Act, the federal payment card industry data security standards, PCI DSS, and GPG 13 Good Practice Guide. It's in a UK based compliance regulatory, and SOX, HIPAA for Health and Insurance Portability of Accountability Act. So the basic concept of security design principle, and there is a saying, we call it as, you're as strong as your weakest link you have. Any organization will be as strong as its weakest link. So once the link is broken, obviously the strength of the organization will be weakened, and also it will be broken. So securing the weakest link, it's a very important concept. So we need to identify which link is weak. And also the defense in depth. Defense, we have multi-layered security process. So we not only care about the individual endpoint, I mean individual computer. The term endpoint, what I refer to, it can also be a computer, it's a laptop, or any end user device. That's an endpoint. So defense in depth will be implementing the security strategy by layers. For example, layer one device as your perimeter firewall. Coming to the antivirus, layer by layer, we'll be securing the devices, failing securely. Also, the concept of providing least privilege. The least privilege is providing the very minimal access to a particular person or particular object to carry out the activity. And separation of privileges, we can also call it as a separation of duties. So a security administrator will not have access to a database administration because he does not need anything to do with the database administration. So the database administrator will do only the database administration. Backup administrator will only take care of the backup. So those privileges and the access will be very limited, and the privilege will be, duties will be divided as per the responsibility of the person. An economy of mechanism, least common mechanisms, reluctant to trust, and psychological ability, promoting privacy. So the psychological ability will be using user behavior analytics. Those can be done with modern tools. Any activity of a user will be monitored, and everything will be logged. Usually, most of the enterprise will fail to read the logs or use the logs effectively. So the security design techniques comprise of multiple objects. The threat modeling is more common because we more aware of the threats, infections, viruses, anything which comes. We design according to the threat, and the risk assessment and the evaluation criteria. So we evaluate the environment and the business requirement. The code security comes on the development side. Vulnerability assessment will be common on all the infrastructure. The method formulation, that even depends on the previous analysis of it. And the cryptographic technique. This is used for securely transmitting your data or storing your data securely, just encrypting so that no one else knows your data. So two types of security patterns. One is a procedural pattern and the structural pattern. We see the procedural pattern here. For example, building up a server from ground, choosing the right alternative of an employee, red teaming the design, proactive patching, login for audit. This is for also logs, enrollment of third-party validation. Third-party validation is using an external auditor for auditing ourselves, and also documenting security goals. These points are examples procedural security patterns, and structural patterns which are designed, mostly which are automated and which are predefined. Okay, account lockout. For example, when a user logs in wrongly, types in password thrice or more number of times for the wrong password, the account lockout. Password transmission, password will be encrypted while transmitting. Server sandboxing. Sandboxing is a concept where the application or the server will be running inside a capsule. Will be encapsulating. No harm will come out from it. So same way the password authentication, trusted proxy, transaction validation, input filters, encrypted storage, etc. Okay, we come across the security domains. One is three layers. One is operating system kernel and the kernel mode and user mode. The kernel is the place where the operating system interacts with the hardware, and the user mode is actually the application layer where we see the applications like Internet Explorer, the GoToMeeting, etc. Anything which runs on the we see and we interact, that will be on the user mode. Okay, the abstract ring model is the CPU hardware layering split of the kernel mode and the user mode. So this will give a good example. The R0, the ring model 0, it's called the kernel, which is the ultimate core of operating system, which is highly secure and no user interaction will be direct to the kernel. And the layer 1 above is ring 1, that is called the operating system components. These are the components which will form a pure operating system. And the layer 1 above is the device drivers, and the device drivers are simply like helper objects, just help the user applications to interact with the operating system components. Finally, the fourth R3, the ring layer, would be the user layer, where we use the any user level applications. Thank you.